You're listening to Monday Matters, a Principal Matters podcast production.
Hi, friends. This is Will Parker, host of Principal Matters, the School Leaders Podcast, along with my co-host, Dr. Jen Schwanke, back for another Monday Matters. If you want to check out our flagship show on Wednesdays and some encore episodes on Fridays, you can do that. Also, we've got some YouTube stuff going on, too. So if you want to see some conversations happening through our show, our editor, Emily's going to be dropping some of those out there. So not just audio, but video as well. Jen, I'm trying to change with the times. You know, it's not fun to do video, but because I like to talk and I don't always like to see myself, but here we go.
Well, let's tell this truth. When Emily reached out and said, "Hey, you guys, here's an example of video," it was an interview I had done with Principal Cafali, and all I could see was my hands and my expressions and my pores. So I said to Emily, I love this idea. It's great, but I will have to sit up straighter and use my hands less so that our poor anyone viewing the episodes won't be like, who is this nut job? So I'm really excited about the video, and I think we will evolve with time and get better.
I have this tendency to, when I'm thinking, look up or close my eyes.
Yeah.
And I used to have students and even my colleagues would tease me. Like if they were pretending they were being me, they would act like that when they talked. And so now when I see video versions of Will, it's just like, oh, there's that guy.
I go. Right.
Yeah. But, I've had a couple of instances, Jen, when I've been presenting at conferences and someone will walk up to me in the Q&A or after a presentation and they'll be like, "Oh my gosh, I just realized I know you. I listened to your podcast," but they'd never seen me. So they were like,
right.
So I'm like, well, maybe we should have a option for people to see us.
Right.
Jen, this episode's going to be coming out late June, and I'm hoping at this point people are just really enjoying some time off in the summers. And we've been going through a series of conversations around my new book, Whose Permission Are You Waiting For? An Educator's Guide to Doing What You Love. And I wanted to talk today about a chapter that I wrote on the value of coaching and why you need one. Full disclosure, when I decided to step into this work full time and it was going to involve a lot of executive coaching, I thought, I need to put my money where my mouth is. Mm-hmm. And so I reached out to a good friend of mine, and many listeners may know him, Danny Bauer, who leads Better Leaders, Better Schools. And I just said, Danny, you've been doing this work full time for a while, and you're so good at systems and you're so good at goal setting, and there are things you know how to do that I haven't quite learned yet that I'd like to be better at. And so Danny became my coach, and in a formal way. Now I've got a lot of other friends. I'll just give a shout out to one of them, Robin Hamasaki, who works for NASSP as a director of learning and leadership there. Sometimes we share coaching, and then sometimes you and I share coaching. And so coaching is one of those things that I don't really, I'm sure I've always understood the value of it, but especially in the last few years, being able to have someone on the other side of you to reflect back to you in ways that are more than just a friendly conversation, but there's a goal for growth, something that's been really valuable for me. But I just wanted to kind of bring that conversation here and also let you talk a little bit about some of the value you found in coaching.
Right. Well, I remember distinctly, it's probably been about 15 years when I first started hearing about coaching, which seems not that long ago, but I stumbled across an article, and it's called Personal Best, and it's by Atul Gawande, and it was published in the New Yorker. And what he was saying is, he's a surgeon, and he's an accomplished surgeon. And he wrote, this article just blew my mind. It, to this day, is on my bulletin board on my credenza. He said, everyone needs coaching. I am a really good surgeon, and I can learn small little tweaks that make me a phenomenal surgeon if I am open to listening and learning. And so I read that, and then that was about the time in my district we were bringing on instructional coaches, and there was some resistance to that from some teachers, and I needed to lead it. So I had to know what words to use to insist on the value of coaching. So fast forward now to today, and I think it can get hard for principals like our listeners, for you, for me, to do two things. First, admit that we want or need coaching, or two, find that coach. Mm-hmm. And so, Will, should I tell about what happened with you and I last week?
Yeah, go ahead.
So Will and I did a virtual PD for principals in New York, and it went very well. And Will, afterwards, you texted me and said, "Great job." And then you said, "Hey, if you'd be open to some coaching, I would offer you some complimentary sessions." And I thought, well, okay, if I believe in coaching, I need to reply, which I did, which was that'd be great. So I figured, well, we'd sit down and you'd say, well, your slides are a little hard to read, or Jen, boy, you talk really fast, better slow that down. That was not at all what our conversation was. You started and you said, I'm going to just ask questions and I'm going to really listen.
Mm.
And so there I am, like, oh, we're not talking about fonts. Okay. And you asked a lot of questions that made me, really, really think about my professional journey, what it is that I'm putting out into the world, why. One of the questions is you said, well, what's holding you back? And that was a one-word answer I gave you, I remember. And then there were also questions where I think I rambled on for 5 or 6 minutes. So then in the end, you kind of closed that all together and you said, what I am hearing is 1, 2, 3, 4. Have you considered 1, 2, 3, 4? And so that coaching session was really transformative to me because I saw what coaching can be. It's not necessarily advice. It is putting a mirror up in front of someone and saying, this is what I see. What are you going to do about it?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
trust me, I've followed the work of Elena Aguilar. I've read the books. I know what coaching should be, instructional coach to classroom.
Yeah.
But when you're looking, you, me, teachers, principals, superintendents, when you're looking at your own coaching, I truly think it's a situation where what you put in is what you get out. So you kind of talk about some of those in your book. So let's get back, let me stop talking and get back to what you talk about in this important chapter.
Yeah. Well, let me give a shout out, first of all, because the National Association of Elementary School Principals has a coaching credential that they do. And when I was still working at my state principals association, my colleague Glenn Absher, who leads the elementary association, and I led the secondary, we went through that training together. And it was during that training that you kind of start seeing the nuances between coaching and mentoring and the different kinds of coaching that are available too. And one of the tools that came across during that time was a book that I reference in my chapter called The Coaching Habit by Michael Bungay Stanier, who's actually a business coach. And he uses a cycle of reflective questions. And I don't want to pretend for a second that I'm an expert on coaching. I will say I've had practice now because I've coached for the last several years, and especially the last two doing this work full time, lots and lots of leaders. And what I've discovered, Jen, especially when you're already working with somebody who's good at their practice, it's not necessarily their practice that needs coaching. It's often whatever the challenge is that that person is working towards to get to the next thing, whatever that next thing is in their own growth. So one of the reasons that I always start with questions, what's on your mind? What else is on your mind? What's the real challenge here for you? Is because it helps me to see what's that obstacle or that thing that's that this leader's wrestling with that is maybe preventing them from whatever that is that they want to do next. And then I love that to frame the question of, and I call this the ideal, if you could wave a magic wand, if you could have the outcome that you want, what would it look like? Because once you've uncovered a challenge, then if you can imagine the possibilities for a solution, you're not at that point telling anyone what to do. They're already imagining the possibilities of what to do. And so I always preface any kind of coaching with those kinds of questions before I ever get to this one, which is, how can I help? And the how can I help question then is permission to coach. That's so you don't start with the coaching. You start with the curiosity that opens up the challenges and the possibilities. So then you have permission to offer feedback and advice. And I know I used to get that backwards all the time, Jen.
Yeah.
Oh, I feel so sorry for some of the people that I used to sit with that wanted coaching, and I would just be the advice monster.
Right.
And that's another term that I borrowed from Michael Stanier, who says, please avoid being the advice monster by asking good questions.
Right. Right. And coaching can also be an opportunity to ask for, to your point, and hear and accept things you don't want to hear.
Mm.
I did a coaching session with a principal who wasn't understanding. She was an assistant principal, and she wasn't understanding why she wasn't getting principal jobs. And as she talked, and as I asked questions, she knew the answer,
Mm.
but she had heard it from her principal and from her superintendent, but she didn't want it to be true. So when I got to that question, how can I help, she said, I want you to be honest with me.
Mm.
And I said, well, what I'm hearing that you're hearing is, and I told her, and she was able to accept it then, because, it had come from her. She just needed this impartial voice
Mm.
who put those words back in it, in a way that was audible to her, so to speak. And what she needed to do was get out of the box she was in and go get some other experiences. And then she was going to be, I mean, there was no question she was a strong leader, but she needed, to have 4 or 5 other experiences that proved she was someone who could learn and grow.
Mm.
And at the end, she said, I think I knew this is what I needed to walk away with. But that question, how can I help, can be the answer might be just hit it to me straight.
Mm. That's so powerful. And it's challenging because, I mean, let's face it, I don't necessarily like to know when I'm doing things wrong. And so now there's a weird part of me sometimes though that is like, okay, if I really want to grow, let me have it. Tell me the hard stuff because I want
Right.
to be able to, if I'm not going to grow otherwise. I'll give a shout out to Jimmy Casas, who most listeners are familiar with his work and his book Culturize. And one of the very first times I got to do a presentation at a state level, Jimmy came and sat in the back of the room and he just politely listened. It was just so encouraging to see him back there cheering me on. And then afterwards, he's like, "Hey, you want to grab lunch?" And I was like, "Yeah." And so I asked him at lunch, "Jimmy, any feedback on it?" And he was so gracious, but also direct. "Hey, Will, from the back of the room, these were some of the things I was struggling with seeing or hearing. If I
Hmm.
was going to redo one slide, I might redo this one." And you better believe when I walked away from that situation, I was polishing the
Yes.
next time that I went forward. But what a wonderful way for some, friendships, mentorships, coaching. It's hard sometimes to distinguish between all of those areas. But I think the most important thing for me is how can I make sure that on a regular basis I'm allowing someone to get on the other side of me and reflect with me to help me have some clarity that maybe I didn't have before, that can help me to grow. And if that sounds uncomfortable, well, you probably aren't going to grow unless you're uncomfortable.
Right.
And that's usually the place, Jen, where it's funny because I've probably said this before, but I'm going to say it again because I'm thinking it. Sometimes I have this really weird process I go through in my work, which is okay, I'm trying something new. I'm going to take a risk. I'm going to try to do this. I'm going to build a system so that it rolls really smoothly because my goal is to like get it to the place where it's flowing and I'm not having to stress out anymore. And somehow in my brain, the goal turns from accomplishing something great into like minimizing the conflict. Like I just want to, can I just coast? Like give me a chance.
Right.
Can I just get it set up to the place where I can relax and I can, and if the goal of any kind of growth or process is that you can get to the place where you can just relax, there is a place for rest. That's what summer's all about and our breaks are all about. And there's a really healthy result of taking time to just take a break and not think and you know to deprogram from all the stuff that's going through your brain. But if you think that the goal of growth is to get to a place where you no longer are growing, are uncomfortable, no longer taking risks, no longer, then we both know if you're not growing, there's no such thing as sitting still. You're either
Right.
growing or and same thing as biology and plant life. If we're not growing, we're going to be deteriorating.
Right. We're not growing, we're dying. That's right.
Yes,
Right.
yeah. And so it's this really weird dichotomy, Jen. And so one of the many, because there's lots of different ways we can grow, but one of those ways we can keep growing is having another person on the other side of us who's helping us see where we need to grow.
Right, exactly. That reminds me of a time I've talked about my dad before on this podcast, and I remember him, I was stressing out. I was a principal. I had all these problems to solve, and I was so annoyed. I said, if people would just, or, if we could only, and he said, you never run out of problems. You know that because the day you run out of problems is the day you're like dead. So please don't wish those problems away. Look at them as an indication that, first of all, you're needed in your job. Second of all, that humans are being humans, and that part of this, mission in life is to tackle problems as they come and solve them as best you can. Build the systems, utilize the relationships, make a decision, whatever it is, because without that, you won't have a reason. Literally, you won't have a reason to get up in the morning. So you want to keep getting better, to keep growing, to embrace those problems and say, this is an area where I think we can get better. And again, as I'm always saying, this doesn't mean beat yourself up. This doesn't mean, I must really be terrible at a few things, so I better call a coach. You can be at the top of your game, as in this the story, the personal best story I talked about in the beginning. You can be at the absolute top of your game and still benefit from someone saying, well, this is what I saw. And then to circle back to your conversation with Jimmy, I think there are times we need to say to someone, hey, hit it to me straight. And when I do that, because, sometimes I've seen coaching where there's so many words, the conversation goes for hours, talk, 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 but there's nothing clear and honest and actionable. And so if you do want that, give it to me straight feedback, you have to make yourself inoffendable. You have to say, whatever I hear, I'm ready to accept it. And if you're not, if you're going to end up losing a friendship or a professional relationship over it, then don't put yourself in that situation. But my superintendent, he's a wonderful coach to me, and I'll say to him, hit it to me. I'm inoffendable. Just say it. And he does, and he trusts that I mean it. If he didn't, he would probably say, you're doing great, we'd move on. So you just have to have your mindset ready to accept the coaching.
So Jen, as we wrap up this conversation, I want to kind of go back in my own memory for a minute and give some shout outs to some people who have been such wonderful mentors and coaches for me. And when I was going through my student teaching experience, Mrs. Myrna Morton was an English teacher at Jenks High School in Oklahoma. And man, she taught me everything, how to grade papers, how to organize classrooms, how to ask deeper questions. I mean, she was tireless in just shaping the way that I understood how to become an educator. And then a fellow colleague, Darren Pettit, he was a drama and speech teacher at my first school. He would come and eat lunch with me every day and just ask me those hard questions and give me suggestions. He'd been doing it longer than me, but it felt so good to have somebody on the other side of you to talk about the challenges and with student behavior or learning standards or accomplishing goals. Lydia Wilson, one of my first admin assistant principal colleagues when I stepped into school administration, she'd been doing it a little longer than me and taught me the ropes and all the craziness from entering student information on the data system to knowing how to do a safe search when you had an unsafe situation at school to managing really hard parent conversations. Donna Brogan, the principal who took me under her wing and just said, well, I'm pretty sure you could be the principal at the school when I retire, and began to really just give me and model for me and correct me when I needed it. Dr. Pam Deering at COSA, the association umbrella that manages our state principals associations in Oklahoma, who gave me the opportunity to work in that role for a while. The list can go on and on, Jen, but all of us have had those people, and I know you have too. We're not who we are today is not because of us. We're the product of so many other people who've coached and mentored and influenced us.
It's so true. It's so true. Yeah. I would name multiple principals as mentors. My first principal. He just told, I only had him for 1 year. He just told me I was awesome, which actually is what I wanted. I needed. I was not a confident first teacher. And then my mentor, Carol King, who was she was my principal. And then she said, you're going to be my assistant. And she brought me over to a different school to be her assistant. And then another powerful mentor I had, he and I both went for a job the same job, and he got it and I didn't. And I then had to serve as his assistant principal. And people said, "Oh, how's this going to go?" And I said, "I don't know." He was a wonderful mentor. We worked so well together, and he remains a friend today. So you never know too. There's those unlikely mentors that along the way just teach you so much. I had a superintendent, Dr. Dave Axner, and I just watched that man work. I wouldn't have done everything the way he did it, but boy, you want to talk about professional. You want to talk about a guy who walks in a room and people know he's in charge. I learned a lot from him. So I have the same as you. I have so many. We could do a whole podcast over people who have tapped us along the way and helped us become strong leaders.
Well, we could. And I'll just give one other shout out to a good colleague, Glenn Absher, who still leads at the Elementary Association in Oklahoma, because he has a podcast now where he interviews just Oklahoma educators. And he always asks them that question, which is, tell me someone who shaped your leadership. And sometimes it's my favorite part of the whole show.
Yeah,
because then you finally get to know who was it that shaped this person that I admire into the role that they have now. So Principal Matters listeners, as we wrap up today's Monday Matters, wow. I hope as you step into summer that you are just reflecting on how much you deserve a good rest. But I also hope that you're reflecting on the version of who you are today based on all the people that have poured into you in the past, giving yourself permission to pour into others, to pay it forward, but also giving yourself permission to let people keep pouring into you. And so whether that's a colleague or somebody close by, or whether you want to reach out to Jen or me and say, hey, we could do some coaching? I love to do that. And Jen, I do a lot of complimentary coaching when someone wants to just experience what it's like. So if that sounds like something interesting to you, you can always reach out to me at my website at williamdparker.com. And Jen, how can they find you?
And they can find me at jenschwanke.com.
Until next time, thank you guys for doing what matters, and we hope you have a great week. Thank you for listening to today's episode of Principal Matters, the School Leaders Podcast. If you enjoyed the show, would you take a moment and like, share, subscribe, or leave us a review? In fact, if you share it out with a friend, even more people can become a part of these conversations. Sign up for our newsletter at williamdparker.com for even more free resources. And don't forget to check out our website to learn more about our books, professional development offerings, Grow Academies, masterminds, executive coaching, and keynote presentations. Wow, let's keep learning together. And thank you for doing what matters.
Monday Matters.